Okay, welcome back. So we've just completed the sweet spot service exercise. So now we know the exact skill that we're the best at and that we enjoy doing the most. So this is the sweet spot because this is going to provide the most value to anyone who receives it. So next, we just want to understand who stands to benefit the most from receiving this sweet spot service, because every brand solves the problem of a want or a need. So again, instead of going out and sort of offering our sweet spot service to everybody, we want to identify the particulars of the people who have the greatest potential to experience the outcome that our sweet spot solution promises. And the way we do that is to ask ourselves the following questions. If we were performing only this service, and we could only get paid after our clients got the results that this service promises, what characteristics would that client need to have for us to take the job? Now, this is a question that was originally coined by Dean Jackson, but I actually learned it from Frank Kern in one of his marketing classes. And I'm not suggesting for a second that you make this your business model, by the way. What I'm actually saying is, how good does this prospect have to be for us to consider working with them? And I really want you to take that approach moving forward. Prospects are applying to work with you and not the other way around. It will be mutually beneficial when you're providing your sweet spot service because you're doing your best work. So they're definitely going to benefit. You don't have to worry about any of that, is there real value in what I'm delivering, or any of that imposter syndrome that people sometimes go through. If you're delivering your sweet spot service and just your sweet spot service, you're doing your best work. And so they're definitely going to benefit. And of course, they're paying, so you're benefiting. But we want to make your benefit about more than just money. We want to develop a circumstance where you're absolutely loving your work and you're contributing to the global economic, social, and cultural growth by producing meaningful creative stuff that moves the needle for your clients and that you walk away from feeling totally fulfilled. So let's just go through some of the characteristics that this prospect has to have in order for you to consider working with them, okay? So I'm just going to switch over to my screen. So, start with the obvious. Of course, they'll have to be able to afford your services. So we're going to put that down over here in the no-brainer characteristics list. Okay, so you're either going to put they can afford me, or if we can get a little bit more granular, we'll probably put something like prospect must be able to afford an X dollar project. Okay, so for me, I'm going to put prospect must be able to afford a 25K project because that's how much we charge for running brand sprints in our professional services firm. So that's my first no-brainer characteristic. If you haven't thought through how much you want per project, that's fine. Just put a round number like 10K or 25K or whatever you feel comfortable with. That's a no-brainer. In other words, a must-have. And then for me, I want to know that they can afford to implement whatever we develop, okay? There's no point me building their brand for them if they can't spend any money on actually launching it and living this brand every day. So I would put in for another no-brainer, I would put in prospect can afford, let's say, another 25K in implementation. Give it a dollar sign because I like it. Okay, prospect can afford 25K in implementation. Again, you decide what number makes sense for you. Another way to think of this might be something like prospect must have a minimum of X amount of revenue per year. So you can put that in there. Or prospect must have 500K, for example, in yearly revenue. You could break it down by profit as well. Prospect must be generating 300K, let's put this in, 300K in profit. However you want to describe the person who is the absolute perfect client for you, right? Another one that we include in our professional services firm is that the prospect must have a customer lifetime value of $5,000 plus, okay? Prospect must have customer LTV of 5K plus. Why? Well, they're paying us 25K to run a brand sprint for them and to architect their brand. At the end of the day, they're doing that because they know that aligning their brand is going to increase customer attraction and retention, among other things, right? So we want to know that the clients that we're attracting for them will be able to cover, quote unquote, cover the branding cost very quickly. So if they're spending 25K and they're taking 5K per client back in, then we need to increase their customer base by only 5 customers, right? Now, obviously, it can be very difficult to draw a straight line between branding and increased customers. So typically we'll talk about an increase in revenue, an increase in stick, and things like morale and productivity over the course of the following 6 to 12 months. But if we break it down like this, we need to get them less than 1 new customer per month for 6 months. That's a pretty quick return. Now, for your niche, you may want to work with a SaaS company or another type of company that has far lower per transaction fees. In that case, it's going to be super important to look at lifetime value, because that's when you're going to start getting into those true value metrics rather than just they bought a $200 product. Your branding services will not only be improving revenue by bringing in new customers, you'll also likely be improving the lifetime value by creating a more satisfying experience within the company, right? Both for employees and for customers, which of course leads to increased satisfaction and increased stick, all of which means increased lifetime value. So what else? That's all revenue stuff. What else? Well, is it easier to build a brand for a client who's just starting out, or one who's been in business for a while and who has the experience and results, both good and bad, to understand what's broken and what's working? Obviously, it's the company that's already in business. They've got some experience with customers. They know what's made them happy in the past and what didn't. They know where there are breakdowns within the company. They know where they're having difficulty communicating internally and externally. So you're not just trying to create out of thin air this "wouldn't this be cool" brand, right? You're going to be able to uncover what's already there and then mold it into something powerful and unique. So we would put, in fact, we do put, prospect must be in business with existing customers and at least 3 staff. Now, you don't have to specify 3 staff when you do this for yours, but our brand sprint process requires at least 3 stakeholders on the client side. So we've made staff a no-brainer characteristic, but you could have them invite trusted colleagues or people with in-depth insight into the brand, as well as the founder, if they don't already have 3. We just don't, right? So let's take a completely different example. Maybe you're working with stay-at-home mums who want to launch a home business, but they have to keep their kids occupied while they work, right? In that case, a no-brainer characteristic would be that they have to have kids. Maybe, if we went deeper, maybe they have to have 2 or more kids under 5 years old. Let's do that, actually. That's going to be a little bit easier to find in the market. So what about the home business, or the type of home business that they want to launch? Maybe they're interested in launching, or maybe they already have a digital course business, right? Maybe they want to sell digital courses from their home with their kids. So that would be another no-brainer characteristic. If your sweet spot service is designed to help busy mums to make their digital course-based businesses more successful, then obviously a no-brainer characteristic would be that they have a digital course business. So we would bang that in there under no-brainer. These are all the things that they absolutely must have for you to be successful. What else? Let's talk about some psychological stuff. For us, we've worked with some people who just wanted to get on calls and talk, but they never actually did anything that we were recommending, right? There was always an excuse for why nothing got done. For that case, we add prospect must be driven. So we want to know that this is someone who's interested in their success. In another case, we had a prospect who wanted to take a contradictory position to every single thing we said, no matter how much evidence we had. In fact, in most cases, it was just an immediate contradiction, right? It was like a knee-jerk reaction. Contradict us without thinking about it. So for us, we require that the prospect must be coachable. No point if you're not interested in listening. Another one, prospect must be enthusiastic. Now this one, I believe, is one of the more important ones. Why? Because an enthusiastic, driven, and coachable prospect is going to be the type of person who will implement. And when they implement, that's when they'll see results. And remember, if we were only getting paid when we got results, of course, we need them to implement. So now they've got 25K in project budget, they've got 25K for after the project, they have an average lifetime value for 5K per customer, they're driven, they're coachable, and they're enthusiastic. So you can see this person is starting to take shape. We're not finished with these characteristics though, we'll get to what's next shortly, but for now, I want you to continue coming up with demographic and psychographic characteristics that your prospects must have in order for them to qualify, which is the operative word here. They have to qualify in order to work with you. So for every one of those characteristics, put them in the no-brainer list. Now the next two lists are sort of optional, but I highly encourage you to give them a go. The reason being, this is the start of your messaging vocabulary, and that's why I do these in Trello instead of on a worksheet. So I can add to it over time, I can remove from it over time if necessary, and I can continue to develop this vocabulary. And then whenever I need to write any sales material or any content for my brand, I can just go here and the exercise that we'll be doing in the next lesson, and I can pick and choose what works, right? So first, have a look at the no-brainers that you've just finished and ask yourself, are you more used to seeing that from the negative side than from the positive side? Here's what I mean. When I mentioned, for example, being coachable as a no-brainer, it was because I'd experienced it from the negative side. So for me, it's actually a deal breaker if the prospect seems like they're not coachable. So I didn't come up with that because I knew I wanted the prospect to be coachable. It was a deal breaker because I'd worked with prospects who weren't. So I would put that in the deal breaker characteristics. Prospect seems like they're not coachable. Okay, so for all of your no-brainers, go through and see if there's a negative association with any of them that you need to reverse engineer and put into the deal breakers list. And that's basically so that when we're having those first conversations, red flags crop up. They always do when you start conversations with a new potential client. And if we stick to our guns in recognizing those red flags when they pop up, and never deviating from our ideal client description and the reasons behind that ideal client, meaning these characteristics that we've developed, you'll never have a nightmare client again. You'll never have to worry about scope creep. You'll never have to worry about deposits not being paid on time. You'll never have to worry about all the finicky little busy work that your agency or your freelance practice is currently working with because of the wrong clients. And then finally, the nice to have characteristics is for any characteristics that you think of that aren't necessarily no-brainers, meaning they don't fit the must-have requirement, but you know from experience that they will make your project more enjoyable or better in some way for both sides, okay? So typically these characteristics in the nice to have list, they're added over time. So you don't need to try and come up with a huge list today of nice to haves. Just be aware that at times you're going to work with someone and then you'll go back and you'll decide that what you thought was a no-brainer is not really a must-have. So you can move it into the nice-to-have list because you still want it. It just doesn't have to be a deciding characteristic. So that's something that essentially you want to have in place so that when all of those other things are satisfied, so that when you've gone through all of your no-brainers and you've gone through all of your deal breakers, if you've got a couple of clients that you're not sure about, look at the nice-to-haves. Do they fulfill a number of those nice to haves? If they do, now you know this is going to be someone that you can work with. Now, here's the biggest benefit of defining all these characteristics. If you only take the clients that fulfill all of those characteristics, they're also likely to pay you more than any other type of client because your clients are interested in the results that your very specific sweet spot offering can deliver. So they have a very specific need that aligns with those results. And that's what they've been searching for. That's how they found you, right? But because so few companies actually define their niche properly, they're likely also finding a bunch of generalists in comparison. So not only is it going to be easier for you to win the client with someone who meets your ideal client characteristics, it's also easier for you to get paid more because by virtue of your specializing on their specific need, you're automatically more valuable to them. So that's it for this lesson. I'd recommend that you try and get that done before you move on to the next lesson, at least so that you have a list of no-brainer characteristics. So those are the characteristics that your prospect must have for you to work with them, which is what makes them a no-brainer. So even if you were to leave the deal breakers and the nice to haves until another time, do them if you can. I highly recommend that you do them if you can, but at a minimum before your next lesson, try and get some no-brainers into these lists. So by the end of this exercise, you should have your expertise, your love, your sweet spot, and your characteristics list populated. Once that's done, put this aside and move over to the next lesson, but keep this board open because we're going to come back to it shortly. So head over to the next lesson and I'll see you there.